All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Growth by Shawn podcast. Boomer Perrault here with me today. Boomer, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, can't complain. So appreciate you joining me. The thing is why I'm interested in chatting with you today. So, founder of the Healthy Movement Blueprint, and there's so many different ways that you can take a conversation in terms of fat loss and like really beating the bush to it, right? It's just the same thing over and over again. It's move more, eat less for the most part, right? There's some nuance to that, but when I'm looking at like your foundation of like what built your business and things like that, like the biggest thing is just moving pain free, right?
Mhm.
And so uh feel free to introduce yourself and just give us a little background about like who you are, what you do, and then we'll really get into the business side of things and how we can help support some people that are experiencing some of these joint pain, low back pain, all that good stuff.
Definitely, definitely. So, yeah, I'm Boomer. I born in New York, raised in Connecticut, and like many guys in my teenage years, I got into lifting to look good for the girls. Over time, as I got a little older, that changed, and the reason, or I guess the way I got into this specific style of fitness, which is more about moving pain free, is my whole life, starting from maybe 12 or 13, I had some pretty bad knee pain. I was a basketball player my whole life, unofficially retired from amateur basketball for now, but that knee pain, as I got a little older, turned into knee and hip pain, which turned into shoulder pain. And I mean, in my early 20s, we're talking 21, 22, there were days where just to go for a walk, I had to warm up for like 25 minutes because I had such bad pain. And I went to physical therapists who could help a little, but it never really cured what was going on. And it got to the point where I was about 23 years old. I just couldn't play basketball anymore because my knees were so bad that I went to a couple surgeons who were like, dude, like I've been, I'm back then, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I was just Googling stuff. I was, oh, like this surgery might help. So I went to a surgeon, asked them for a specific surgery, like, yeah, this could help. Let's do it. So I asked two of them. And in hindsight, the surgery would not have helped me at all. Uh, Before I agreed to do it, I was like, let me just go check with one more physical therapist and see what he thinks. And he brought me into his office. He had me do a couple squats, a couple lunges. And after 5 minutes, he was like, dude, you don't need surgery. You're just abnormally tight. And that was the first time at like 23 years old, I've been lifting for 5 years, where something like clicked in my head where, like lifting is not just about looking good or, telling other people what your max bench press is. It's truly you can use it to actually feel better. So I worked with that guy for a little bit. I got better. And then I started doing my own research, ended up getting a few certifications. And then over the last 10 years, I've I wouldn't say I've completely healed my body. I like to tell people I'm still in like the trenches with them because you see some people on Instagram that it's, oh, like, here's this great mobility routine to help you if you're stiff, but it's some like gymnast that can fold their body in half that no one could ever do. Where I have made significant strides, but I'm not 100% there yet. So a lot of the stuff that some people can't do, I might be able to kind of do, but I'm not doing these crazy movements. Like, I'm not crazy flexible. I'm still there. So it's been a nice journey. I've learned so much and I've been able to help a ton of people as a result.
Yeah. Now, when I was in high school, I was a big video game guy just uh throughout high school. And then I found out what a girl was and then I started going to the gym, right? So you can't hate on that too much,
No,
right?
no, of
Because
course
I
not.
still work out for myself, but I mean, of course I want to look good for the girls, like that's a huge part of it still.
Mhm.
So the biggest thing for me is like, how does a kid, because kids, when you're born, for the most part, unless you've got a bone issue, XYZ, throw in some type of abnormal birth defect, for lack of a
Mhm.
better term here. But how'd you get to the point that even at 12 years old, you were starting to experience knee pain? Because I think that that's really uncommon, even
Mhm.
for athletes. Like I've worked with a lot of athletes, not towards that range, but closer to like the 17, 18, 19. Oftentimes it's a lot of hips that are just, you're you're just doing some basic leg circles and they're like, oh my God, like your entire like hip girdle is just moving back and forth like rocking a
Yeah.
boat. So how do you even get to a point at 12 years old? Is it just because you were abnormally tight?
I think genetics definitely played a role. Like I remember those fitness tests you would do in elementary school and middle school, all those, I was always fine with the push-ups and sit-ups, but whenever you had to do the sit and reach test, I always had the worst score in my gym class. So I think genetics played a role, but I also, if I wasn't playing basketball, I was sitting on a couch watching TV. And so while I wouldn't say I was sedentary because I did play a lot of basketball, I definitely think all the sitting I did do combined with just being naturally stiff made me even stiffer. And then it threw off my mechanics. So then when I started playing basketball, I remember I would play so vertically, where on defense, you're supposed to get low, bend your knees, sit your hips back. But I was so vertical. And I think that also contributed to more and more pain because now I was putting unnecessary stress on the joint, specifically the knees, because when I would have to cut back and forth, I wasn't low, so my knees were kind of locked out. When I would jump up and down, I'd kind of land with my legs straight. I wouldn't bend them. So I think all of that kind of just compounded into just unhappy joints.
Yeah. So one of the biggest questions that I find is how do you start to differentiate joint pain from just general muscle soreness?
So you're saying like after a workout and someone's sore?
Um, Even just like let's say like someone's it's tough because it's like even like I find like people that are coming to meet, they're like, "Oh, my knees hurt, my hips hurt." When is it joint related versus when is it just like an imbalance, or when is it um like yeah, what you're saying, like just general soreness after a workout?
Mhm. Well, it's funny you actually say that because one of my in-person clients, yet literally yesterday, was talking about whatever exercise we were doing. It was like burning the muscles in a good way. But because she was new to fitness as far as working with me, we had been working for a year at this point. She was like, "Oh, like I didn't really understand what it was the muscles were supposed to feel like when you're actually working them." And there definitely is this misunderstand I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or just a lack of understanding and something that might come obvious to someone like us where oh yeah obviously like the muscle's supposed to burn when you're
Yeah.
doing bicep curls. People don't understand them. They might think that is, oh, my muscle's burning, that's not good, I want to stop. um, I think there's a few ways I can break this down. First off, if you have like severe pain inside a joint that hurts to touch or it's incredibly sharp and it won't go away, we're probably talking more about an injury than just general joint pain. And so for that, of course, I would refer anyone to a doctor. As far as just like general pain and stiffness that is good versus bad, uh, it a lot of it does come down to just body awareness. Uh, for example, usually if it is the joint, that's probably not necessarily a good thing. Uh, if your muscles hurt to touch and you just work them out the day before, the 2 days before, that's probably just a normal soreness. But if you're doing squats and your knees are hurting you the next day, there's probably something going on. Maybe the muscles are too stiff. You're causing some inflammation that's not so good in the joints. So, in general, I would say joint pain is probably something's going on. Muscles after workout, it's probably okay, but it does often come down to just understanding your body and what is a good pain versus bad pain.
Yeah. So going off of that, when we're looking at um stretching versus mobility training, there's a time and a place for both. How are you differentiating when to utilize either of them, or are they built into every program that you're doing?
Real quick,
Mhm.
off topic, is that an Oura ring you're wearing?
No, it's just a regular black
Oh,
one.
okay. So
No.
I got an Oura ring,
Yeah,
so
no,
I wasn't sure if you're
no,
part of the
no,
brotherhood.
not really my jam,
Gotcha,
honestly.
gotcha. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Um, when are you differentiating between when to use a mobility program versus when should people be stretching, and where does someone start with something like that?
Mhm. So I'll break it down to someone on their own versus working with me.
Hmm.
The way I work with most people, and this is something that's changed a lot in the last year or two of training for me, all of like, it doesn't matter if I'm working with someone that's 80 years old and they're goal is just to, be able to live life without pain, or a 30-year-old who is still looking to play recreational basketball, I still pull from essentially the same 30 to 40 exercises. And everything I do is really focused on strengthening, obviously muscles, but strengthening joints and moving them through a full range of motion. So whether it's strength training or specific to mobility or even my stretching, everything comes down to mobility through strength training, if that answers your question. Because I feel like you get the best of both worlds with that, where obviously if you add weight to a a stretch or a mobility exercise, well, now you actually start to build the muscles around the joint. By adding the weight you and going through a full range of motion, you can actually start to build the tendons and ligaments inside the joint. And as far as static stretching goes, I have nothing against that. I actually still do it,
Yeah.
but there's never been any scientific research, at least up until a couple of years ago, that shows it has a long lasting effect more than like 20 minutes or something like that. So I
Yeah.
don't really do or recommend too much static stretching, unless, like I said, for me, I still do it unless you just feel like you feel better. It helps.
Yeah.
But most of what I do is just mobility through strength training.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is just like bringing yourself through an actual full range of motion, right? I
Mhm.
think that's where people go wrong. And people want to stick this band-aid of static stretching on things like, oh, I'm just not flexible enough. Well, no, you can't even squat down quarter of the way down. Like that's part of the issue here. Let's set yourself up to see how we can start to work that so that you can actually get into somewhat full range of motion squat. I think that's the biggest misconception for me in terms of, oh, I just need to stretch. I just need to stretch. Where it's like, for me, even I've done, I don't know if you've heard of Romwad or Pliability. It was a big CrossFit app. Um, but it was static stretching. And so it was
Uh-huh.
20 minutes every day. I did it for 2 years religiously, and my
Mhm.
flexibility never improved. Like I
Yeah.
was so disappointed by it.
And you probably felt a little better for the 10 to 20 minutes afterwards, but then
Yeah.
after that, you didn't see any benefits.
Yeah, it was really the mental benefits. That's it. Like that's all it came down to for me. So, um, when you're looking at like a new client, like what are most people coming to you with? Is it just the pain-free movement, or are they specifically coming for fat loss or muscle gain? Where's the most amount of clients that you have right now for that?
So in person,
Hmm.
it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I'll work with pretty much anyone. Honestly prefer the in-person
Hmm.
clients. I think it's easier to help someone that way. It's also, especially if you like the person,
Yeah.
it's nice to build that connection online. And this is by choice, just
Hmm.
because this is who I feel like I can help the most. It's almost exclusively people who sit a lot, that are newer to fitness and have joint pain. So
Yeah.
I get pretty specific there. But again, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's so many other coaches that are, mainly work with people for weight loss or mainly work with people for strength training, anything like that. For me specifically, I just know I can help
Yeah.
people that fit in that little niche the best.
Yeah, and now that you've mentioned that, like especially the busy professional that's sitting at a desk for long periods of time, how do you help them incorporate more movement throughout the day?
Mhm. So, from more specifically, the way I do it the most is I actually created all these things for different joints and body parts called daily movements. So
Hmm.
I do like 4 or 5 of them throughout the day in addition to my workout, which are these routines that at most take like 6 minutes and on the low end take like 3 minutes. And so, for example, I'll start my day with doing my foot daily movements. And so it's just a nice way to mobilize my feet and ankles, strengthen the stuff in the area. And that is no matter the goal of anyone, I always give each one of my clients at least one daily movement, depending on what they're coming to me for. If it's back pain, it'll be for the back. If it's, XYZ, it'll be for that. And so that's the most practical way to answer that is that. As far as how to get people moving in general outside of something like that,
Yeah.
I think it's really obviously people should be moving more, just walking around as much as they can. But even from a much smaller scale, Something as simple as just, and you'll probably notice me start moving more as the farther we go with this, but
Mhm.
just moving the position that you're sitting in. How many people, especially if they're working, sit in a chair, start rounding forward like this, and they just sit
Mhm.
in this position for 45, 60 minutes, an hour and a half without moving at all. That's not good. Now, if you could do something where every 20 minutes you just simply go from a normal seated position, now you cross one leg over the other, after 20 minutes, cross the other one. That's not going to be a massive game changer, but at least you're starting to get some type of movement in your joints. So that would be on the smallest scale. If you sit a lot, just start switching the position you sit in if you can. I don't know if you can see, I actually have a chair right there. I'm
Mhm.
sitting on a stool, and then I got another chair on the other side of me. When I'm working on my desk, I'll change the chairs I'm sitting in
Mhm.
every 30 to 60 minutes. And each chair is a different height, different firmness. So it's always changing just very slightly the way that I'm sitting. And then the
Yeah.
last bit that's easy, that's still on the small side, is every hour I recommend that people get up and just move their bodies for anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. And that could be doing something like those daily movements I just mentioned. That could be going for a quick walk. That can simply just be standing up for a minute or two. And I think if you combine all of those, it's not going to make up for a lack of movement throughout the day,
Mhm.
but it is a good start.
Yeah. That's something I've never really heard of is just you're the first person that's really recommended just changing positions. And
Mhm.
honestly, it hadn't really crossed my mind before too. It's clients that I work with, it's more of, hey, let's keep a band in the office desk.
Mhm.
We'll do some band pull aparts throughout the day. We'll set sticky notes, reminders, get up every hour, 2 hours, whatever you need to do. Take your sales call outside on a walk, all these different things. I had never really heard of even just switching the position. And even as you were talking, I was finding myself, I was like, wow, I'm gonna sit in this position, this exact position for the next like 30 minutes here, like that was my
Yeah.
exact thought. So that's something I had never really heard of that I think could be real beneficial.
It's
Um,
actually sorry, but
no, go ahead.
it can really be advantageous in the sense that depending on the positions you're using, especially the chair too. I know a lot of people don't have the chairs that work for this, but
Mhm.
if I'm almost just kneeling on the ground right now, I know you
Yeah.
can't see, but if you have a desk and a setup that you can do this, like you can get into a half kneeling hips stretch stance.
Mhm.
Or like I said, when you cross one leg over the other, if you have tight hips, you can actually really start to open up the hips a bit just by working. And so it's instead of just doing it to prevent any negative side effects, you can actually kind of go on the offensive and say, okay, wow, I can actually open up my hips just by the way I'm sitting or the chair I'm using.
Yeah, that's really beneficial and just something I hadn't really even thought of. So,
Mhm.
um, a little more of an off-brand question because I think that you'll enjoy this. If you were to stand on a mountaintop and everyone is listening to you, everyone in the entire world, what are you going to tell people
Uh, Fitness related or just in general?
in general?
Okay, well, we could go down some rabbit holes right here.
You can,
As
hey,
someone who,
anyone's beliefs, I'm open to it. I respect
yeah,
everyone's opinions, right? Because your experience of the world and my experience of the world, they're completely different, right?
uh-huh. See, now the beauty of asking someone like me this question is I'm not someone that's just going to give the first answer that comes to my mind. Like
Hmm.
I like to actually answer these and take them seriously. The downside is sometimes it takes me a bit longer to answer them because I like to give that answer. Um, but if keeping this within 30 seconds of me thinking, I would say, and this is good advice for anything really, is um, one of my favorite quotes is nobody's coming to save you.
Hmm.
So and what that means to me is whatever you want to do, and if we want to keep this to fitness, if you have knee pain, if you have back pain, instead of relying on a doctor who is probably just going to prescribe you some pain medication that's not actually going to get rid of the issue, just treat the symptom, take it upon yourself to actually fix your pain. If you don't like your financial situation, take it upon yourself to actually change your financial situation. So if I could just shout one thing from the rooftop that most people would probably just ignore, it would be to whatever you want to do in life, take it upon yourself to actually make it happen.
Hmm. And the reason I ask this is because there is there's really, in my opinion, about 90% of especially fitness, health, and overall life is 90% mental, right?
Mhm.
10% physical, just in my own terms. And so when I ask someone, especially in the health and fitness field, that gets them thinking a little bit more with this mental aspect, it's so hard to change people's beliefs. Someone
Mhm.
that's been doing something for 20 years and their life isn't that bad. It's comfortable enough. They can go out with their friends on the weekends, but they're overweight and things like this, and they have a little bit of pain, but at least they can still move around for the most part. Those are some of the toughest clients to go and work with from my own experience, someone that's not exactly open to that change. How do you really help people have those breakthroughs and instill that change in themselves?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely tough. There's a lot of it's some of them are just straight up stubborn,
Hmm.
and there's some people that I wouldn't say they're stubborn, but it's kind of like goes in one ear out the other. I think a lot of them, unfortunately, it's you can't really do much. Like, whatever the saying is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like you can lay out you know, everything that there is to lay out, show them, hey, if you just do this, this will happen. But if you keep doing this, it's not going to work. But they just won't hear it. So I think some people, it's, until they have their own change of mindset, it'll never happen. For the other ones, I think it just comes down to simply breaking something down in a way that they can really grasp and understand. If I were to talk about how important it is to increase protein for somebody that isn't eating a lot of protein. And I start to talk about the different amino acids that make up protein and how important something like leucine is. They're not gonna like it's just that is something that's gonna go in one ear out the other, but it's understandable because they don't even know what that means. And so I can't expect them to be like, okay, yo, that makes so much sense. But if I say, hey, you know, most of your body parts, including your joints, are made up of amino acids, which are protein. So the more protein you eat, the better your body's going to feel. When I say something like that, that might start to register. And then I can give them examples of what happens for someone that goes from not eating a lot of protein to eating enough, or the opposite of someone that isn't eating enough and the consequences of that. So I think just breaking it down to a way that someone can understand that relates to whatever their goal is probably one of the best ways to help people change their mindset on something they've been stuck on for so long.
Yeah. And I think that's really tough because that's where that really big empathetic component comes down to, where you need to appreciate and understand where they're coming from and how they view the world. And then once you can befriend that and show them, like, okay, yeah, I can see why you view it this way, but here's how we can view it another way too, and give them that perspective switch. I think that's one of the biggest things. And so when you're working with an in-person client, when I was doing in-person training, one of the toughest things that I had found, and I was a lot younger too, and I didn't really understand like how much of a mindset component, which is a broad word as well, was to this game. It was more for me just like, hey, you're paying $300 a month to this gym, and I train you twice a week. Like, why aren't you doing anything outside of this? So I don't know if you've found this even just through your years of experience, but someone that comes in, they work really hard when they're with you, but then when they're not with you, it's they just don't follow anything. Have you ran into that before as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, it's honestly, it's probably a pretty even separation of the amount of people that will because so I even my in-person clients, I put everyone on this app. So and then I create workouts for them to do
Hmm.
on their own. And so they can follow it on the app. They know exactly how to do every exercise. I have probably about a third of the people that will do it no problem. I have a third of people that will do it as long as I'm asking them about it, kind of staying on top of them a bit. And then I have about a third that come to me like, Boomer, listen, like I hired you because I have no intentions of exercising on my own. So don't ask me because I'm not going to do it. And for me, I'm like, that's totally okay because at the end of the day, if I'm working with someone twice a week, that's
Mhm.
still 120 minutes a week of intentional good exercise they're getting that is going to be very impactful on them. Ideally, they'd have another couple of days in there. But, I understand that some people, they just don't want to do it. And those are the people that I was talking about where, a little more on the stubborn side, it doesn't matter what I say, how important it is
Yeah.
to move outside of those 2 hours in the week. They're just not going to do it.
Yeah. And I think like that's tough. It's because throughout the many years that I have, like a decade in the industry now, with clients that I've worked with, and I take fault and I also put them at fault. I think it's collective, right? I
Mhm.
don't think it's their fault. I don't think it's my fault. I think it's both of us. Because I don't want to sit there and like blame someone like, okay, I gave you this program and you didn't do it, right? It would be easy for me to go and
Yeah.
just blame someone. But I really think like in our industry, and I don't know across the board in other industries, but I would say honestly, like a third of people get the real result that they want just because of different lifestyle factors, all these different things that again can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And so when I look at something like that, like why do you think people will go and make such financial investments? And then is it still just the stubbornness, or why don't people want to change? That's the thing. That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't know why people don't want to change.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have any official numbers, but my
Yeah.
guess would be it's probably less than a third that really like reach their actual goals that they
Yep.
want. I think it's a combination of things. One, there's definitely the people, and it's the whole Planet Fitness business model where they know they can get thousands and thousands of people that they can never actually fit everyone in their gym. But if they're only charging $10 a month, there's a ton of people that will get the membership and feel good about having a membership. They don't even need to go to the gym. I think there are some people that forget why they started exercising, which I'm first off, everyone should be exercising anyway,
Hmm.
or at least moving their body, because
Yeah.
obviously the way we live life, like exercise is the way people do it nowadays. But I think some people forget, oh, I got this membership and I started working with a trainer because I want to lose 80 pounds. But then they start going to the gym once a week to work with that trainer. And now that's the accomplishment. That's the goal. Unintentionally has become the goal. So I think a lot of people also forget what their goal is and just be satisfied with actually just showing up.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's just, I don't know. I think taking care of your health nowadays, it's has not been prioritized uh, by by people in general.
Hmm.
I think, and this is where I start to go down one of those rabbit holes. I think
Hmm.
at least in this country, because we have a for-profit health industry,
Hmm.
that a lot of very powerful powers that be make a lot of money when people are unhealthy. And
Hmm.
so it's never really been pushed or encouraged. Hey, like it should not be considered normal to not exercise,
Hmm.
eat more candy than vegetables and fruit, and be severely overweight. Like, but unfortunately, that is the norm now, and now it's accepted. Where I remember, I go to bed at freaking 8 o'clock nowadays. Like I'm an old
Hmm.
man, but
Yep.
when I used to go to the bars and I wouldn't drink, and some random person would come up to me like, "Oh, I started a conversation." I said, "What are you drinking?" I'd say water, and they'd say, I swear to God, like people would literally say, "Why?"
Yeah.
As like it's so like crazy to people that I would be
Yeah.
at a bar drinking water, and so being healthy has now become like the weird thing where being unhealthy is just the norm. So
Yeah.
I think the long-winded way of answering that question also is just I think it's just accepted now that being out of shape is the way of life, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't feel they need to make the effort to actually follow through on those goals if they're at the gym.
Yeah, it's unfortunate and it's a huge rabbit hole, right? You can look at the entire food industry as a whole, and people that are a lot smarter than the two of us are really good at marketing, really good at branding, and really good at making food, if you want to call it that, taste good.
Yep.
Like you go and eat candy for a week and then go and eat a carton of strawberries, the strawberries aren't that good. But then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you go and eat just meat, fruit, and vegetables for a week and it tastes like God's gift,
Hmm.
like, and our taste buds are changing too. And you can look at the pharmaceutical industry and, how that plays a role. And it's all part of I mean, you can call us conspiracy theorists the best you can. Everyone's got something that they believe in, right? And so when I look at all of this and how easy and comfortable it's gotten for our society, like, do you think that it's going to change in the reverse at some point?
Hmm. Well, let me, were you always into health and fitness, or did you develop
No,
that?
so I between my junior and senior year of high school, I dropped about 30 pounds.
Hmm.
And that's where it really started. I had always been up to that point, the chubbier, heftier kid. Overweight, like pulling the shirt out to make me feel thinner or something like that. Insecure. And then when I was playing football, I wanted to get better, and plus I wanted girls to look at me, and that was the big thing. And I just started enjoying the gym, and so from there, that's when it became something of, oh, hey, this is really cool. Went to school for it, and I was like, oh, I actually just like enjoy this. This is my hobby. Let me show other people how cool this is too.
So, but you were an athlete then, like you were playing football at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's easier, a little easier when you're younger. Um, I think there's more societal pressure at that point
Yeah.
to be in shape. I think as we get older, and unfortunately, the older generations have a big influence on what happens to the younger generations. Obviously, they're raising them.
Hmm.
So I think and also I should say too, the way, there's all these great advancements in the way that we live, which have a lot of benefits, but also it's making life easier, which makes us lazier as people. And so it only gets harder and harder because now you need the willpower and discipline
Yeah.
to start to get into the gym or to, deny almost everything in the grocery store and just stick to the outside of it because everything inside is essentially junk. So it definitely gets harder, but uh, I don't know if anything ever changes, to be honest, just
Hmm.
because it's just there's so many people at this point that are lazy, overweight, and just don't care about their health or what they look like.
Hmm.
Uh, Honestly, the only thing that might save us at this point is one, just a absolute like catastrophic event that like
Hmm.
forces people into famine, or these and I hate it, but these drugs like Ozempic, that's making it a lot easier for people to
Hmm.
lose weight. Whatever you think about them, they're
Yeah.
obviously effective.
Yeah.
That eventually there's going to be some pill that is like equivalent to a steroid that you take it and you don't need to work out, and now you're jacked. Assuming something like that doesn't come with some crazy side effects, which it always does, but those might be the only two things that really change because it's only getting worse and worse, and I don't see how, I mean, we're talking about kids in this country now, almost 50% of them are overweight or obese. Like,
Yeah.
that's insane. Well, I remember when I was growing up in elementary school, there was one or two kids that were overweight. Everyone else
Yeah.
was thin. You look at pictures of people in the 70s, 80s.
Hmm.
I grew up in the 90s. So,
Yeah.
same thing. It was so different than it is now. And it just
Hmm.
keeps getting worse.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I was one of the few overweight kids. There wasn't a ton, but I mean,
Mhm.
there was, I went to a small school, maybe 500 kids, but out of the 500, less than 10%, and now like I've been a substitute teacher before, and it's, oh my God, like you can't say anything to kids, and you're trying to instill good beliefs and discipline and all these character traits that people really want and need, but you can't offend anyone, and school lunches aren't good. I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole, and we could sit here and bitch and complain about it, or it just depends on how the audience takes this, where you can sit here and think that we're bitching and complain about it, or if it's not even on your radar right now, it might get someone thinking.
Yeah.
And that's why I love having these conversations with people. Because if it
Yeah.
just gets people thinking, then beautiful. That's
Mhm.
that's all we're looking for. Form your own beliefs and thoughts. And even with Ozempic, like people have asked me about it. And one, I haven't done the research on it. I don't know the long-term effects of it. No one
Mhm.
really does yet. If you're someone with 100 pounds to lose, and this is for my personal opinion, if you're someone with 100 pounds to lose and you want to go and change your diet, lifestyle, and all of your habits and take that, then awesome. Let's do that. But if you're someone with 30 or 40 pounds to lose, I don't know if that's what you need, but if you're 40% body fat, which is crazy,
Mhm.
crazy high, right? Then sure, let's use that to kickstart and get you some progress. That way you build some momentum, right? But
Mhm.
again, I don't know the long-term side effects, and I'm not going to tell you personally, this is what I would use. That's use your own discernment there, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and the way we talk about it, it just makes the future just very bleak, because that wasn't the most enthusiastic answer.
Yeah.
Definitely I didn't give, and it wasn't for either of us
Mhm.
really, but it's just sometimes the truth isn't the prettiest, and unfortunately, the way we're heading, which I don't see how it gets better with the way everything
Mhm.
is going, we're just when 2020, when all that stuff was going on, that was considered a pandemic turned, or some people consider it an epidemic now. But
Mhm.
just the general health of this country is such a severe epidemic that's been going on for, at this point, probably decades, but it just doesn't get talked about. And until that gets brought up in a mainstream sense, it's
Mhm.
just going to continue to get worse. And I don't see why it gets brought up. And by the way, just a side note, I listened to your podcast, the solo one you did talking about your time as a substitute teacher.
Mhm.
It's definitely crazy what's happening in the school systems now.
Yeah. And again, like I actually had someone was asking me about all the jobs I've had, and I don't know, I'm 28 years old and I've had 25 jobs,
Mm.
right? Like if I don't like something or it doesn't fit for me, I'm just honest, hey, can't be here. It's all good. Let's part ways. Um, and I was having this conversation with someone because I've done substitute teaching, and I had told them, I was like, look, like there were days I would walk into a high school, okay? I wouldn't need to show my badge or anything. I just walk in there with a backpack and lunchbox. I could be anyone. And you know what? Like it's difficult to understand. And the person that I was talking to, they were like, "Oh my God, like I'm so scared." And I'm like, "This isn't meant to scare you. This is
Mhm.
just my personal experience. This is the truth of what happened, and that's it.
Yeah,
Like that's it. And if you want to change it, if you're that scared, then go and do something to change it, right? It's part of why we're both in health and fitness, right? We love it, but at the same time, like we're trying to instill real change in people.
yeah,
Because you get people healthy and all of a sudden they got energy, all of a sudden they're thinking for themselves. It's so much bigger than just great, you lost 20 pounds. Great,
yeah,
you can walk around now. It's so much bigger than that.
yeah.
So I appreciate you listening. And uh before we get into our last question, so Boomer, where can we find you, work with you, things of that nature?
Mhm. So, healthymoveandblueprint.com is the best place to find me. I just recently started taking on new online clients. I've been doing in person for a while. I stopped taking on new clients online because I wanted to change change my approach. And I was only doing customized training,
Mhm.
and I just felt like for the time it took to actually find people, I wasn't able to give the clients I had. I shouldn't say that. That's being taking an easy cop out.
Yeah.
I wasn't giving the clients I had enough attention because it was really, really hard to find clients to actually give the attention to.
Mhm.
So I still do the customized online training, but now I've also came up with a system which I think is as good as you'll find, especially for the price, non-customized options. And this way I figured it's easier to find people that I can help. And I think the non-customized options are good enough to help just about anyone, depending on the goal.
Yeah.
So I just opened that up to people. And the actual first 100 people that I'm taking on are getting a lifetime 25% discount for the non-customized options, just so I can get some people in there, get some
Yeah.
feedback in case I got
Mhm.
to change anything. So the discount code's on the website, but if anyone that listening wants to take a look. I don't know when this goes up, if there still be any spots left, but
Mhm.
healthymovementblueprint.com, you can find any of the information there.
Yeah, beautiful. So As we get into our last question, this comes from a question from the previous guest. So this is from Brad Nelson. He built the Debt-Free Dad, helping people get out of financial debt. And so if you had no debt or payments, what would be the first thing you do? I don't know your financial situation, but that was a Brad's question here.
So I can answer this literally because my only real debt I've had in my life was my mortgage, and I just sold my place. Um, so I don't have any debts really. The first thing I'm planning on doing is waiting for a house to actually show up on the market that I don't have to get into a price war with, because the real estate market's crazy right now, and buy myself a house. So that is what I'm planning on doing. Find a place I can get myself some chickens, and yeah, start a garden.
Awesome. Beautiful. Appreciate you being on. This was a great conversation for people today. Thanks, Boomer.
No, I enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
Cool.